I went to Kettering University. Back then it was called GMI, Engineering and Management Institute right here in Flint, Michigan. And then I went on to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh.
I went to GMI as well. In fact, Chris and I met when we were 18 years old, one of the first classes. I remember listening to Chris. He was sitting right behind me, and I realized then I thought this guy was going to be president of the United States, and who would have thunk that years later we would have gotten to business together. So 1985.
May of 1985. We met each other. They had a, I'll never forget, I was working construction at the time, running a jackhammer, and we'd gotten hired in with a sponsoring corporation from the auto industry. And they came and had kind of a get acquainted session. There was, I don't know, 12 or 15 of us prospective students that were going to go to college and then work at this factory and switch back and forth every 12 weeks throughout our 5-year education. And they had this little get acquainted meeting in the conference room. We had our ties on and we were all gussied up for our first meeting at the big company. And that's actually when I met Orrin. He came walking in that day and they had donuts and air conditioning in there, and we got to sit in these cushy chairs for 2 hours and we did absolutely nothing. We got paid. And that was my introduction to corporate America. Then I got to go back to the jackhammer and stuff. But that was the day I met Orrin, May of 1985. Well, we got our engineering degrees. At least I got mine. I think he got his. He was at graduation too. And then I went on to get another degree. He studied at U of M, getting management training. And then we both started at the same company, actually, in automotive engineering, just different parts of the same division. And worked at that for 5 or 6 years, I guess, and both got to the senior engineering position before we started doing entrepreneurial stuff on the side.
We'd run into each other, but we worked in different areas. I worked in fuel systems and Chris worked in spark plugs, but we'd run into each other and just kind of kept track of each other. And back then, I think we looked at ourselves more as competitors because we didn't understand how leadership is more of a win-win enterprise. So we really looked at each other as we would be one day fighting for a top spot against each other. But I'd say over time, we realized leadership's more of a one hand lifting up each other and helping each other.
I remember when Orrin was gaining notoriety at the company, he had done some things with some competitive benchmarking and gotten recognized nationally, and he was involved in some patents and stuff. And it was kind of the first time, I mean, I'd met him as a teenager, and we'd gone through the educational experience together and kind of kept tabs on each other and got together maybe once in a while, but we were acquaintances at best back in those days. But then I remember when he came back on the radar screen as, like he says, maybe even a potential competitor for climbing the corporate ladder someday. And he was getting recognized at a big gathering of all the leaders of this one particular part of the division. And was it the director at the time? I think the guy was the director, and he's up in front of this body of managers for the whole corporation, that division of the corporation. And he kept going back to the work Orrin Woodward had done. And that's a kind of a unique name, so I knew it must be that same Orrin Woodward that I knew from college. And sure enough, then I saw him sitting up in the front row, and you know, he's a modest guy, so he's kind of blushing, and they kept talking about him and talking about his work and bringing it back up and bringing it back up. And that was the next time I really have a vivid memory of what Orrin was doing professionally. And it wasn't too long after that, maybe 2 or 3 years, that we ended up hooking up to do some entrepreneurial stuff with the internet. So.
Well, I started a special assignment where we actually started what they call benchmarking, where we compare the best attributes of our competitors' products and compare them to our products, and then try to figure out where there's variances between what they do and what we do and how we can improve our products. And so we started a special assignment on that. It ended up going very well. We ended up getting a lot of patents out of that. I think there was 4 overall. And after reviewing some of the work, some of the managers said we ought to apply for an award for this, and it ended up winning a national benchmarking award. So I was able to speak at a couple of conventions on that. So we had a lot of blessed times. I really enjoyed being an engineer. I just didn't see that as my future as I started going down the road, realizing I was constrained money and time-wise in that. Well, it was the first time that there was a technical national benchmarking award given. So it was a big deal, and it kind of catapulted me into realizing that maybe there was more to life than a 9-to-5 job.
I was fortunate too. I got involved in a project, a big financial project at the time. Lots of millions of dollars allocated to new equipment and kind of a whole rethinking of how this one particular automotive component was going to be built. And I came in as just an engineering student, wet behind the ears and didn't know anything, and had a couple really great technical mentors, people who were engineers. This one young lady in particular was just fantastic, and she's now one of the big leaders at that division today. And she kind of took me under her wing along with some other people, and I had just a great experience learning how to build kind of a focus factory from the floor up, and got involved in a lot of that. And then when I got back from my master's education, I got assigned back into that same area and was given leadership positions at first in production management, really frontline supervision, which was like being in boot camp, but it was a very good experience. And then went into engineering project management, then product development, and then taking the products that we developed and actually designing the manufacturing system that would make the very products I was involved developing. So I look at that period of time there as, in a technical engineering sense, really good experience. I got to see the whole breadth of product development to manufacturing on the floor and have a position in every one of those steps along the way. So it was really good experience.
Both of us learned systems thinking, and that's helped us in writing leadership books and in everything we do. Because as an engineer, you learn that there's a start and finish, and then there's steps along the way to accomplish that. And you know, Chris has accomplished so much at school. He was always the top performer. I think graduated #2 in the class. So he's always been the top at learning and growing.
Well, there was an opportunity from the corporation we worked at to go and get fellowship, which is basically some financial help to go on and get your master's degree. And I heard about that and applied and was accepted. And then the program was to go apply to 3 schools, and I did that. And but Carnegie Mellon was unique among the 3 schools that I got accepted to because it was offering a potential chance for students to go study overseas for their master's thesis. And so I took advantage of that, ended up in Japan, went to Toyohashi University of Technology over there, Toyohashi Gikidai. And again, another great experience, worldwide exposure to the auto industry in the early 90s, where Japan was totally dominant at the time, and my whole thesis was try to figure out some of the components of that dominance and dig into the Japanese industrial leadership at the time, and it was just wonderful. So that was great.
Well, I think you know, we are the product of many great minds through our reading, through our association. Both Chris and I have been blessed to be mentored by Pastor Robert L. Dickey, who has read over 10,000 books and has a knowledge of the Bible. And to us, we believe that wisdom is applying biblical principles to life. And so through the association of all these great minds, Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen further, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants." And that's how we feel. We feel blessed by all of the people that we've heard speak live, and we could just rattle off all the different names. As far as who we work with anybody who's hungry. In fact, that's one of the principles in the book, is we believe leadership begins with hunger. Where there's no hunger, there's no leadership, because there's not a willingness to learn. So we're not impressed by somebody's titles necessarily, whether they were a doctor, lawyer, or a ditch digger, makes no difference. Because we believe it's a lot easier to teach a hungry person how to be sharp than it is to teach a sharp person how to be hungry. So who we work with are hungry people. If there's a hunger in their heart to change and grow, we believe that if there's a hunger and a willingness to change, then a person can change. And that's all captured on the art side of in our book.
As a matter of fact, in the book, we highlight a list given by several different leaders, from Ross Perot and others, what they look for in the development of leaders. Immelt from General Electric, all these big leaders that have their list, what they look for as far as, in the book we call it, what a leader brings. Right. What a leader brings to the table as foundational qualities that are required to grow in the capacity of a leader. And we've kind of surveyed the inputs of all these leaders, what they say they look for, but it does, just like Oren said, it all boils down to hunger. You can take someone, an individual who perhaps isn't all that sharp to the eye of someone who might say, oh, that person doesn't look like a leader to me. But if that pilot light of ambition burns inside, of hunger, of a positive, true ambition for a bigger vision of where they can be, that is the best raw material for leadership that one could find. We'll go through all the lists in the book and we go through the details, but you can shake it all out to hunger and the desire to see a better vision come true.
A good resume will get you an interview, and it may even get you hired. But after that, how far you climb is based upon your hunger and willingness to learn and grow. And you know, Chris got the great grades and had a fantastic resume, but the success he's accomplished is due to his hunger to learn and grow on a daily basis. Well, I think I would have to give Michael Dell the credit to inspired us. As we went and saw Michael Dell at the Detroit Economic Club, and he was talking about the keys to the internet being content, which is building of the site, commerce is the ability to have products to sell through your website, and then community, which is a group of loyal buyers that will repeatedly buy from the same site. And as we started to understand the role of the community, and a billionaire stating that that's the secret to the internet, Chris and I decided that we would focus our efforts in building communities and driving traffic to the various websites. And as we started to understand we were on the leading edge, we wanted to capture these thoughts into a book so that we could inspire hundreds of thousands and literally millions of others to own their own business online. Well, I think we were down on a private island and we were discussing what it would take to have a bigger community. And as we kept going back, this one word, leadership, it kept getting back to, boy, if we had more leaders, the more leaders could mentor more people, and we would grow bigger communities, and we could have more fun, make more money, and make a bigger difference. And so then we got into a whole discussion of what leadership was. And I think that's when we realized that, you know, there's all kinds of leadership books that'll tell you do this, do this, do this. But leadership is still, even with all the books, it's still kind of an undeveloped frontier. And Chris and I could not get our arms around what leadership was. We'd throw out all these one-liners, you know, well, leadership's this, leadership's influence, leadership is character, leadership is task, leadership's relationships. But as we went into it, we realized we need to capture some of our thoughts on leadership. And I think from that foundation, we started putting together some of the concepts into which eventually led to the book.
Yeah, we, as a matter of fact, we wrote a lot of the book together in different states. One of us would be in one state and would be in another. A lot of it was done over the phone together. And I'll never forget sitting in the sun in Florida talking to Orrin. I think he was in Michigan, and we were struggling with this concept that, you know, leadership is obviously part art. And that's the part that's so hard to define, but yet there's some science pieces to it too. And one of the big breakthroughs that we feel came and kind of put that work together was trying to define the difference between the art side and the science side of leadership, and starting to put some clarification into what those two halves of this big whole are. And that was a big breakthrough that day, and allowed us to clarify our thoughts. What we thought we knew about leadership really came into clear relief once we had that conversation. That was Orrin's breakthrough. I'll never forget on the phone that day, sitting in the sunshine, as he kind of organized those thoughts, in my mind at least. And that was a big breakthrough for trying to clarify some of what we were trying to explain about leadership, what we knew, or what we thought we knew, and what we were experiencing in the building up of our business. We were trying to figure out how to put that into words for others to learn from, no matter what business or line of work they happen to be in. And that was a big breakthrough.
Without leadership, there is no long-term success. You know, we talk in our book about leadership being a component's character, task, and relationship. And any success that's not built on those three foundations will not last. I mean, you can be the most dynamic influencer in the world, but if you don't have character, eventually people are going to find that out. So we want to build something that'll last long-term, literally longer than us. Both of us are focused on legacy and significance. So we want to build it on a foundation that'll last. And without a foundation of leadership, true serving other people, making others better than yourself, we don't believe it'll last long term.
And what we've attempted to do in the book is give pictures from history that show that exact example. Here are leaders from this walk of life in history. Here's one from this walk of life in history. Here's a man that did such and such. Here's a woman that did such and such in the 16th century. Different snapshots in history that demonstrate that everything good, all the great human advances have come on the heels of someone or some group of somebodies taking responsibility for leadership and to force something to happen that was a vision in their head. It was real in their brain before it was real in reality first. The next generation looks back at that and just, oh yeah, of course, it's always been this way. But it came about on the sweat of someone's vision and doing the work, the character, the task, and the relationships, putting those three together and making it happen. So our book tries to demonstrate that's how things are accomplished. And when you have a vision and you pursue it, the only true way to get there is to use and influence leadership.
Leaders got to make decisions. And it's not just historical forces coming together that make these great changes.
Right.
There's a leader that saw these historical forces and had the courage of their convictions to make decisions and get it done.
And stay the course.
Leadership is the ability to influence in a positive direction. Without character, without the willingness to do the work, and without relationships to influence others in that same direction, you don't have leadership.
Right.
Show me any organization that's failed and I'll show you a failure of leadership. Show me any organization that's had uncommon success and I'll show you a leader. I mean, sometimes they're hard to identify because they're so self-effacing and humble. But somewhere, somebody is leading, somebody's creating a vision, a common flow. I always use the example that vision's like a river, and a person can jump in that river and they're just naturally taken downstream with the flow. And the leader creates that vision and then gets people to buy into that. So when they get started on a movement, they're naturally flowing that way because everybody's bought into that vision, that common vision.
Everyone touched by a leader's efforts is benefited by the leadership, and a lot of times it's like the ripples in a pool. It goes out from there, and there's a ripple effect that the original impulse, the original change of leadership, it goes on, and it maybe can't even be defined how far it goes. You think of William Wilberforce in the book, and we talk about how his character and his conviction that slavery was wrong and his dedication to basically ruin and put to the side all of his political aspirations for the pursuit of making slavery illegal within the Kingdom of England. You talk about that vision, that compelling drive. The ripple effects of that one man's initiative back then is still going on today. I mean, so it's almost uncountable, the rippling effect through time and across different groups of people that a leader's effect can have. And a leader can be a single mom struggling to pay the bills and do a good job raising her child. Anytime someone influences other people in a positive direction toward a vision that they can't shake, they just have to move in the direction of that vision. It can be small, it can be big, but the ramifications of that are immeasurable in the lives of people affected. And that's leadership. A leader can be anybody of any category that's going toward a vision that compels them to influence people in a positive direction.
Everyone is susceptible to leadership. So when you ask, who's affected by leadership? Everybody who's around the leader. Because at a bare minimum, they see an example of leadership in motion. They said leadership is character in motion. So even if they choose not to lead themselves, they still have an example of what leadership is.
This book has both principles of leadership and practical specific applications that aren't necessarily specific to our particular business where we gained our experience and learned a lot of these lessons, but they are practical enough that they can be applied to other people's realms, whatever they're doing. This book has what we feel is a very good balance between the principles of leadership and the application, where this isn't a book written by a couple of theorists. We're not paid philosophers. We don't sit around and pontificate. We are busy actively living what's in that book on a daily basis, to our pain or to our pleasure, based on how well we do it on a daily basis. And that book is written from two people who are in the battle of building businesses on a regular basis today in these times, but yet standing on the shoulders of giants and principles that are true to leadership throughout history. And so it has both the practical and the philosophical combination that can be useful to anybody at any level. I think that's one of the big distinguishing marks of this book. A lot of books will talk about what leadership is. Some will talk about where it comes from. Some will give examples. We believe our book puts it all together in a framework that can be understood by anyone, that gives illustrations that clarify the concepts, but are very practical depending on what someone's doing. They can implement it right away.
We broke it down into the art and science of leadership, the art being who you are and the thoughts you're thinking, and the science side being what you do. And so what we try to do is our attempt at a holistic approach to leadership, to where it's not just what you do, because if you do a whole bunch of things without being the right person, it's not going to last long term. If you're the right person but you do nothing, you won't still have leadership because you're not in motion. So as we sat down, we started studying historical examples, because Chris and I both are avid readers, and we wanted to pull out the basic principles that where leadership can happen. And I feel that this book has captured it in a way that I've never read in any other book.
We named the book that because of the ripple effect that we talked about earlier, because of how a revolution starts with a tiny spark. The revolution that made 13 colonies free from the mother country of England and turned into the United States of America and populated a continent and led the free world through 2 world wars. That all started with Samuel Adams convincing John Hancock that we shouldn't take it from King George III anymore. It all started with a tiny spark, the impulse of one person decided to take a stand, and that spark spread. It caught a few other twigs, it made a little fire, and then it turned into a bonfire, it turned into conflagration, and that's what revolutions do. So it all starts in the individual. It goes from the hunger Orrin talked about, but the effect of that lights the fires of others and causes massive things to happen. It could be the mother whose child was killed by a drunk driver. She decides to do something about it and starts MADD, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving organization, which spawned a lot of other organizations of a similar shape, and has made a big impact in turning back the tide on that, getting new laws enacted, and raising awareness. Those types of ripple effects from one person taking a stand, deciding to lead, are immeasurable, like we talked before. And that's what we mean by launching a leadership revolution. In the book, that title means A, in your individual personal situation, you as the spark of your own change in your life, taking responsibility to lead wherever you've been placed, to bloom where you've been planted, to take responsibility and lead where you are right now with what you've been given to work with. That spark alone, acted upon, can cause a revolution of results in your life. But it doesn't stop there. It always spreads to others of like-minded people who grasp the same vision, who latch onto it, say, I see that, I'll help you. And that's where it forms into a team. It's why leadership and team talk, teamwork, is impossible to separate. The two always end up being discussed together. Because what a leader does is he or she attracts a team, and that starts that revolution.
So many people feel that one person can't make a difference. But Chris is talking about a spark. One spark can create the largest forest fire. And so as an individual, we've got to be individually responsible for our own growth, for our own spark. And if we can create that spark, then we can create that forest fire of leadership change and the leadership revolution. Well, I think that's what the book's about, is they have to decide that character does matter. In our society today, you'll hear from a lot of people, well, values are relative, but I don't believe that's true in leadership. If you take a look at how far will you follow someone you don't trust? How far will you follow someone that you know is a liar? If you can't trust a person, you cannot influence. You will not allow that person to have influence in your life. So character does matter, and to me, that's foundational. If you're going to be a leader, then you got to start saying, "Are you who you say you are?" And if you're not, then that's where you need to address that and start changing, and that's covered in our book.
And then obviously tasks, working on actually going and doing the work. You can work on your character and apply it to nothing and accomplish very little.
Exactly.
But then you get busy. Character in motion is leadership, and that's where it dribbles into the task category of our trilateral leadership ledger that's in that chapter of the book. And then finally, the relationships that you knit with other people to build a team together to move in that direction toward that vision. So what one does then is starts with character, works on character as the foundation stone, and then moves toward the task, getting busy doing what they do in a character-based fashion, and then compelling others to get wrapped up in the same vision toward the same purpose. It takes work, it takes discipline, and what one thing we haven't talked about yet is that leadership and personal growth requires courage.
Right.
Requires courage to confront brutal reality, courage to make the changes, courage to develop discipline, and courage to stay the course. But the rewards are way, way more than the fear of any such courage would require.
You know, you can say, boy, I'm casting this great vision, but no one's buying into it. People have to buy into you before they buy into your leadership. So in other words, they've got to say, I trust Matt. I trust Matt as a person. He's got that vision. I know Matt's a person of his word. I will follow Matt up that hill. If he gets out of his foxhole, I'm getting out of mine, because Matt's worthy of following. So until you have influence, you will not have influence until you have trust. And you won't have trust until people buy into you because of your personal character.
You have to be believable. You have to be convincing because you're convicted. People won't believe you at first until they know you believe you. That's why leadership isn't a game. It's not something you can fake. It's not a fake it till you make it. You can't posture yourself as a leader. All the things that you might see in the management sector where people think they have a title, or they have the right degrees, or they have the right experiences, or they know all the buzzwords to say, or they know which spot at the table to sit and they play the games. That is not leadership. Leadership is a hard to define quantity that describes the impact and the influence one individual has on another or others. It's a quantity. It's something that and it's based on believability, character, and conviction, and it's electric. It leaps across from one person to another, and they buy in. They believe you because you believe you, and you believe in what you're doing. They're convinced because you're convinced, and you're very convicting because you're convinced. And those quantities have to be there. We could talk about this part all day.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is the black smoke part of leadership. This is the art side of leadership. You can talk specifics all day long, but you have to develop the ability to have that influence in order to be classified as a leader at all.
People think you need a title in order to be a leader. In other words, and they want to throw around what I call positional leadership or leadership by force. You will do it because I'm your boss. You will do it because of my title. But that's not true leadership, because the more you pull that, the more you pull this force, the less actual influence you have, because people are only doing it because they have to. And if people only do something because they have to, that's not leadership, that's just management by force. True leadership is when people want to follow you because they know you have their best interests at heart. Well, I think we heard reading that genius is taking the complex and making it simple, and an idiot takes the simple and makes it complex. And when you start dealing with leadership and all the things that we were discussing on that private island, we said, boy, this is really complex, and how do we simplify this? Well, how do we get our arms around this concept called leadership? And as we broke it down, we realized there's certain things that you're doing, the science side, and there's certain things that you are as a leader, and that's the art side. And then as we started compartmentalizing it into these areas, we started seeing a lot of connections that weren't apparent originally. I think, let's go to that example. Let's say you have no character. Let's say that, boy, you'll do whatever you want, whenever you want, if you think it benefits you. If you score a 0 on a scale of 1 to 10, if you score a 0 in leadership or in character, then it doesn't matter if you're a 10 in task and relationships, and you multiply those together, character times task times relationships equals your overall score. So then the perfect score would be 10 times 10 times 10, 1,000. And none of us are going to score that because we're all imperfect and constantly growing. But if you have a 0 in character, it wouldn't matter if you were a 10 and the other two, your still overall score is a 0. And so clearly, no matter what else you do until you start working on character, you're not going to improve that score. And so this gives you a way that you can kind of confront brutal reality, as Chris was saying, and have the courage to look at yourself. And that's probably one of the toughest things to do, because we're all self-deceived. We're all